Thanksgiving had always been the one day I looked forward to, no matter how busy life got. It was the only time I felt like we were a real family. So when my parents, Linda and Robert, called me a week before and told me they wanted a quiet, peaceful dinner, without me, the words sank deep. I tried to laugh it off at first, thinking maybe they were joking, but they sounded serious. They said they just needed space, as if my presence was some kind of burden. I kept asking myself what I had done wrong. I replayed every recent conversation with them, searching for a moment where I might have upset them, but there was nothing. The more I thought about it, the more it hurt. I had always been the one trying to keep the peace, the one who showed up for birthdays, holidays, emergencies, always the dependable one. Yet somehow, I was the one they wanted to remove from the picture. On Thanksgiving evening, while the whole country gathered around warm tables, I sat alone in my small apartment. I heated up a frozen dinner and tried to swallow the lump in my throat. It wasn't just the loneliness, it was realizing that the people who were supposed to love me didn't want me around on a day meant for family. I kept trying to convince myself it wasn't a big deal, that maybe they really just needed quiet, but the truth was clear. They had made room for everyone except me. It was the first time I saw my place in their life for what it truly was. And even though I didn't know it then, this moment was about to change everything. A few days after Thanksgiving, the truth slipped out in the most casual way. My aunt called to check on me, assuming I had been at my parents' house like every year. When I told her I wasn't invited, she sounded surprised and mentioned that Tyler and his girlfriend had posted pictures from the dinner. They were all sitting around the same table I grew up eating at, laughing, smiling, looking perfectly complete without me. Hearing that stung more than I expected. My parents hadn't wanted space. They just didn't want me. They had chosen Tyler, like they always did. It was a pattern I had tried to ignore for years, hoping it would change as we got older. But it hadn't. He was still the one they praised, the one they showed off, the one they made excuses for. And I was still the one they pushed aside whenever it was convenient. I kept thinking about how easily they had lied. They didn't even hesitate. They wanted a peaceful holiday, and to them, that meant excluding me. I wasn't loud, I wasn't difficult, I wasn't causing problems, yet somehow, I was always the extra piece that didn't fit. What hurt most wasn't just being left out, but realizing they didn't see anything wrong with it. They treated my absence like it didn't matter. Like I was a guest, not their daughter. Their coldness didn't come from anger, it came from indifference, and that was worse. For the first time, I started to see my family clearly. I wasn't the problem. I was simply the easiest one to push away, and they knew I wouldn't fight back. But deep down, something in me was beginning to shift. Growing up, the difference between how my parents treated me and Tyler was always obvious, even if no one ever said it out loud. Tyler could mess up a dozen times, and they would still find a way to defend him. If he got in trouble at school, they blamed the teacher. If he quit a job, they said he was finding himself. If he needed money, they handed it over without hesitation. I was the opposite. I learned early that if I wanted anything, I had to earn it myself. I worked part-time in high school, then took on 2 jobs in college just to stay afloat. I paid my own rent, my own bills, my own tuition. I didn't complain, and I never expected anyone to rescue me. I thought my independence would make them proud, but instead, it seemed to distance me even more. The more I handled things on my own, the more they acted like I didn't need them at all. Whenever I tried to share something good happening in my life, they brushed past it. If Tyler walked into the room afterward, suddenly all attention shifted to him. It was like he carried a spotlight everywhere he went, and I was standing in the corner where no one looked. What confused me most was how they treated my efforts like they were nothing. I tried to be responsible, calm, steady, the kind of daughter any parent would appreciate. But to them, it felt like I was always too much. Too serious, too focused, too independent. Meanwhile, Tyler's mistakes were seen as charm or personality. As I got older, I kept hoping things would even out, that adulthood would change the way they saw us. But Thanksgiving showed me that nothing had changed. If anything, the gap between us had only grown wider. Thanksgiving night felt heavier than I expected. I kept telling myself it was just one dinner, just one holiday, but the silence in my apartment made every thought louder. I sat on my small couch with a bowl of microwave mac and cheese, trying to pretend it was enough, trying to pretend I didn't care. But with every bite, the truth settled deeper. It hurt. It hurt in a way I wasn't ready to admit. I knew my parents were only 20 minutes away, sitting at a table I had set countless times growing up. I could picture the turkey, the mashed potatoes, the laughter, and the way my mom loved showing off her cooking when guests came over. Except this year, I wasn't welcome. They had found room for Tyler and his girlfriend, but not for me. I kept wondering how they even explained my absence. Or maybe they didn't mention me at all. The loneliness that night felt different. It wasn't about being alone, it was about feeling unwanted. There is a specific kind of pain that comes from being pushed away by the very people who should pull you closer. I tried distracting myself with a movie, scrolling through old pictures, even cleaning just to stay busy. But everything reminded me of what I wasn't part of. Eventually, I just sat there with tears I didn't want to shed. I wasn't angry, I was tired. Tired of being the extra piece, tired of being overlooked, tired of pretending it didn't affect me. That night forced me to face something I had avoided for years. Maybe my family didn't see me the way I saw them. Maybe I cared more than they ever would. 2 days after Thanksgiving, my phone rang early in the morning. I almost ignored it, thinking it was just another routine call. But when I saw my dad's name flashing on the screen, something in my stomach tightened. He never called me that early. When I answered, his voice was shaking. He kept saying my name over and over before he finally told me what happened. Tyler had crashed his car the night before. He'd been drinking, lost control, and hit a guardrail. The car was totaled, and he was taken to the hospital. My mom got on the phone next, crying so hard I could barely understand her. They both sounded terrified, confused, and desperate. And suddenly, the same parents who didn't want me at their Thanksgiving dinner were begging me to come help them. It was strange how quickly their attitude had changed. 2 days ago, they wanted space. Now they needed me to be the calm one, the steady one, the problem solver I had always been. Not because they suddenly realized my value, but because they knew I was the only one who could handle chaos without falling apart. They didn't ask how I was doing or if I was busy. They didn't mention Thanksgiving or the way they had treated me. They immediately started listing everything they needed me to do, the paperwork, the conversations with the doctors, talking to the insurance, figuring out what would happen next. They relied on me like I was some kind of emergency backup system they could switch on when life got messy. Listening to their voices, trembling with fear, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me remembered all the times I stepped in before, fixing things they couldn't handle. But another part of me felt something new, a sharp reminder of how easily they pushed me away when things were good, only to pull me back when things fell apart. When the panic in their voices settled a little, the requests began. My mom kept repeating that they needed me at the hospital right now. My dad jumped in, saying the doctors were asking questions they didn't understand, and Tyler was in no condition to answer anything himself. It was like they had already decided I would take over before I even had a chance to speak. They didn't ask if I could come, they assumed I would. They didn't wonder if I had work, plans, or even the emotional strength to deal with everything. They moved straight into instructions. My dad said I always handled things better, that I knew how to stay calm. My mom mentioned that the bills would be a problem because Tyler didn't have insurance. Then, without hesitation, she asked if I could cover it for now, since I was good with money. I felt myself freezing. Just days ago, they didn't want me near them. Now I was supposed to drop everything to clean up a mess I didn't create. They spoke like it was my obligation, like I owed it to them simply for being the responsible child. There was no acknowledgement of Thanksgiving, no apology, not even a hint of guilt. It was as if that night had never happened. What shocked me most was how natural their expectations sounded. They weren't embarrassed to ask. They weren't ashamed. They truly believed I was there to pick up the pieces whenever life went wrong, even when they had made it clear I wasn't wanted otherwise. I listened quietly, realizing for the first time how deeply they took my efforts for granted. They didn't see me as a daughter with feelings, they saw me as a solution. And after everything, that realization hit harder than their rejection. I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, my heart torn in two. Part of me wanted to rush to the hospital, to help Tyler, to calm my parents, to do what I had always done. Old habits die hard, and I had spent my entire life being the dependable one. I thought that was who I was supposed to be, the one who fixed problems, who smoothed things over, who made everyone else feel safe while I carried the weight alone. But then my thoughts drifted back to Thanksgiving. I remembered sitting there with a cold dinner in front of me, alone, while my parents laughed and celebrated without me. I remembered the quiet way they had excluded me, as if I didn't belong. That memory cut deep. I realized their love wasn't unconditional. It came with rules and limits. It came only when it suited them. And the truth hit me, I mattered to them only when it was convenient, only when they needed something, only when it benefited them. For the first time, I saw the pattern clearly. I had spent years bending myself to fit their expectations, trying to earn approval that would never truly come. I had forgiven so many small hurts, pretending they didn't count, because I wanted to be close to them. But that closeness had always been one-sided. They leaned on me, expected me to be there, and yet they discarded me whenever they wanted space or comfort. I realized I had a choice now. I didn't have to automatically drop everything to fix their problems. I didn't have to let their demands define me. The part of me that wanted to run felt familiar, but the part that wanted to stand firm was stronger than ever. For the first time, I thought about myself first, and it felt both terrifying and liberating. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. My parents were still frantic, telling me what needed to be done, listing every problem, every step, every detail. Normally, I would have said yes immediately, packed my things, and driven over. But this time was different. I paused and spoke slowly. "I'm sorry," I said. "I really can't help this time. I have a lot going on, and I need space." The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. They were the exact same words my parents had used on me just a few days ago. I could almost hear their faces change over the line. My mom gasped. There was a sharp, quiet intake of breath that told me she understood exactly what I was doing. My dad stammered, trying to argue, to reason, to convince me, but I didn't back down. I stayed calm, steady, and polite. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I simply refused. For the first time, I wasn't the automatic fixer. I wasn't the one who dropped everything to clean up their messes. I was finally setting a boundary. And I could feel the weight of years of being overlooked and taken for granted lifting off my shoulders. They were stunned. I could almost see it in their voices, the realization that the person they had always relied on wasn't there for them this time. I wasn't angry, not really. I was simply making them face the consequences of the choices they had made. I had been pushed aside, ignored, dismissed, and now, quietly but firmly, I was reclaiming myself. In that moment, I knew things would never be the same. This was no dramatic revenge, it was quiet, powerful, and absolute. I had finally taken control. I watched from a distance as my parents struggled to manage everything on their own. The hospital bills piled up, the doctors asked questions they couldn't answer, and Tyler, barely conscious, was no help at all. They scrambled to figure out insurance, payments, and legal issues, and I stayed put, letting them face the reality they had always expected me to handle. For years, I had been the one to step in quietly, taking care of problems no one else wanted to touch. I had scheduled appointments, explained confusing paperwork, and made sure things ran smoothly while they relaxed or focused on Tyler. They never thanked me, never acknowledged the work I did behind the scenes. I was invisible when everything went right, but now, when I stepped back, they were forced to notice. The calls I ignored turned into frantic messages. The confident tone my dad always had disappeared, replaced by uncertainty and panic. My mom, usually calm and controlling, sounded helpless. They tried to juggle everything at once and realized quickly how heavy the responsibility was. They realized that I had been carrying far more than they had ever understood. It wasn't instant, but I could see the change in them. Their pride and indifference were replaced with a reluctant acknowledgement. For the first time, they truly grasped how much effort I had put in over the years, how much I had kept the family together. I didn't gloat or rub it in, I simply let them experience the consequences of their own choices. It was a quiet lesson, but it was clear. They had underestimated me for too long, taken my support for granted, and assumed I would always be there. Now, without me, they had to face life the way I always had, responsible, patient, and alone. And I finally felt free of the weight I had carried for them. A few days later, my phone rang again. It was my father. Normally, I would have answered quickly, ready to listen or help, but this time I hesitated. When I finally picked up, his voice was quiet, tired, and different. There was no anger, no frustration, no demands. Instead, there was defeat. "We didn't realize how much we depended on you," he said slowly, almost like he was admitting a truth he had been avoiding for years. "We took you for granted." Hearing those words was strange. It wasn't exactly an apology. There was no "I'm sorry" or "we were wrong." It was just a confession, a recognition of what I had already known, that I had carried more than my fair share, that I had been the invisible support holding everything together while they stayed comfortable. Part of me wanted to forgive him instantly, to go back to being the person who smoothed everything over, the one they leaned on without question. But another part of me knew better. I had spent years being their safety net. I had sacrificed time, energy, and peace to make their lives easier. And for what? Recognition only came when they were desperate. Love only came when it suited them. This time, I stayed silent. I let his words hang in the air, letting him feel the weight of what he had said. I didn't reassure him or promise to come running. I didn't offer to fix anything. For the first time, I was holding my ground. I realized then that their guilt didn't require my immediate forgiveness. I wasn't their emotional crutch anymore. I had learned the hard way that respect and care are earned through actions, not just words. And I wasn't ready to give myself away again. After everything that had happened, I finally turned my attention to myself. For the first time, I didn't worry about what my parents or Tyler needed. I focused on my own life, my own happiness, and my own growth. I found a better apartment, a place that felt like my own sanctuary, where I could relax and not be reminded of the constant expectations I had carried for years. Work became a source of pride rather than stress. I accepted a promotion I had been hesitant to pursue, finally embracing opportunities that I had always put aside to help my family. For the first time, my achievements were for me, not to prove anything to anyone else. I began investing in myself emotionally, financially, and mentally, learning that my worth wasn't tied to anyone's approval. Distance from my parents brought an unexpected relief. I could breathe without feeling guilty. I didn't have to constantly monitor their moods or anticipate Tyler's next mistake. I didn't have to be the one who fixed everything. I learned that peace isn't about control, it's about removing yourself from situations where your care is taken for granted. It was also a time of clarity. I realized that family isn't only defined by blood. Being related doesn't automatically mean love, respect, or appreciation. True family, I learned, is made up of the people who value you, who support you, and who treat you with respect. Slowly, I felt lighter, stronger, and more confident. I was no longer the invisible child who had to prove herself constantly. I was Madison, capable, independent, and respected, first by myself, and then by the life I was building. For the first time, I understood that my happiness didn't need anyone else's permission. A few months later, I got another invitation from my parents. They wanted me at a family gathering, smiling and cheerful, the way I had always been expected to be. For a moment, part of me hesitated. Old habits die hard, and I remembered how easy it used to be to say yes, to drop everything, to make their lives smoother. But this time, I didn't. I thought about all the years I had carried the weight for them, the times I had been pushed aside, ignored, and taken for granted. I thought about Thanksgiving, about Tyler's accidents, about the countless moments they acted like I didn't matter. And I realized that agreeing to go would erase everything I had learned about my own worth. So I politely declined. I didn't yell, I didn't make them feel guilty, and I didn't announce it to anyone. I simply said no. It was an act of self-respect, quiet but powerful. For the first time, I was in control of my choices without needing to justify myself. In that silence, I felt a strange satisfaction. My revenge wasn't dramatic or loud. It wasn't about anger or proving a point. It was about living my life fully without them. They had taught me that I wasn't needed, that my care and effort could be ignored, and now I finally believed them. They lost access to the daughter who had always held everything together, who had silently carried the family when they couldn't. And now they had to face the consequences of their choices. I didn't need to fight or argue, I simply stepped away and let life show them what it felt like to manage without me. For the first time, I felt free, respected, and completely in charge of my own happiness.